The phone conversation between fantasy veterans Bob Harris and Matt Waldman is a quick and dirty rundown of players, units, or teams from Sunday's games. Feel it or fuck it is our instant verdict on the fantasy value of a player or situation, not the ability, effort, or character of the player. This is just how two old-timers in this industry talk when they got a lot to cover in a little time.
Happy post Super Bowl. I think this it's official holiday now, isn't it? Nobody's going to work or anything, are they?
I don't know. I'm working. I don't know about you. I already got some players done, but we don't count.
I'll probably do something. If I'm a lawyer in Philly, I'm probably working today.
Yeah, that's probably true. or if you're street maintenance, that's for sure too.
Street maintenance. If you're the Crisco guy, if you're working the light poles, that it was a busy week last week to no avail.
Maybe this week not too much. Yeah, but
what do you think of the game?
It was a fun game. I enjoyed it. I watched it about 4 hours after it was over, but I certainly enjoyed it. And so I'm just wondering, there were a lot of questions that I had with this, when watching this game from a fantasy perspective, especially the running backs, because I watched, they trotted out Miles Sanders first, saw Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell second, and from my perspective, maybe not from a fantasy angle, but just from a football angle. Miles Sanders is the best athlete of the three, but I think he's the worst running back of the three, if you ask me. I actually, when I look at Gainwell and Scott, I think they're actually more skilled players at the position. They just don't have the athletic profile that Sanders has, and the difference isn't so great that you're gonna you're gonna say Miles Sanders should be third on the depth chart, except when he makes mistakes, which he did do. So I'm just curious. Do you think if Miles Sanders goes elsewhere, do you think this was his peak year of his career? Are you feeling that idea?
No, I'm not feeling that idea. Fuck that idea. I feel like maybe somebody else will see the value of making a more concerted effort to put the ball in his hands and take advantage of his athleticism, maybe in a scheme that's keeps him from making those mistakes or limits his opportunities to make mistakes. He's a great player. I say every time I talk to somebody who covers the Eagles, why do the Eagles not love Miles Sanders as much as the rest of us love Miles Sanders? And, their reply is invariably, well, they do love him. And, and I'll go back to the Chicago game, and said they loved him so much that they sat a 1,000-yard rusher into the middle of the second quarter. I mean, never heard of anything disciplinary. It just seems like their usage with him is hit or miss. I would like to see somebody, I'd like to see him go to a place where they maybe, do put the effort to put the ball in his hands and see what he could do. We can both remember 2 years ago where he was pretty much the only playmaker in that offense. He had the injuries at receiver. He was the long threat, the short threat, and every threat in between. So I'd like to see somebody make better use of that. So no, fuck that.
Yeah, I'm kind of in between feeling or fuck it. If I had to say right now, I'm kind of feeling it. And only because the Eagles have such a good offensive line. They have done a lot recently to try and maximize what he does well or optimize him. And I think they may be frustrated that he still makes some mistakes that they wouldn't like to see. But the talent is definitely there. I don't think he's the least talented back in the backfield. I do think that from a skills perspective, if Boston Scott was a similar weight, he would be starting over Miles Sanders. If Kenneth Gainwell, Kenneth Gainwell got so much love pre-draft, but he was one of those guys that I was like, he took a year off from Memphis during the COVID year, and he was still 195, didn't gain any weight, and still didn't gain any explosion in addition to that. And, to me, skill-wise, he could have been a future Tiki Barber, and maybe he still gets there, but he didn't add any man weight, didn't add any of that extra explosion that would make him a top starter. So I think Miles Sanders has a chance to be peaking this year just because the Eagles' offensive line is so good, and I don't know where he's going to wind up that you could say is a similar circumstance. But I'm feeling your explanation as well. So what about Kenneth Gainwell? Does he have fantasy starter value in 2023 for the Eagles if Sanders goes elsewhere?
Probably so. So feeling it remotely, but also in a timeshare. I mean, whether Trey Sermon's season begins in earnest, people. The Phoenix rises. So I don't think he's, they don't show me this, any reason. They've shown me no reason to believe they're going to be able, commit to one back and and let that guy handle a huge workload. I think they're going to split it up a little bit, and whether it's Trey Sermon or they grab somebody in the draft or sign a cheaper free agent, whatever, there'll be somebody else in the mix. But still, a reasonable fantasy play, a guy that you'll be playing some weeks.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kenneth Gainwell is heavily in the mix, and I wouldn't be surprised if Trey Sermon doesn't get a real shot, considering that they had a second round grade on him and they traded for him. They were attempting to trade for him before he got cut, and then they ended up acquiring him. So I don't think they draft a back very high. They will draft one, though. I agree with you that they will. So yeah, I think there's potential fantasy starter value there in 2023. I'm not trying to break the bank and say, ooh, he's a guy you need to start raising his value inside round 15. But I think that, 15 in the last 5 picks of a 20-round draft, Kenneth Gainwell needs to be on your list, and he may be much higher than that once we get into the summer and see what his actual role may be and what the talk is. So Boston Scott, he's a free agent. Does he earn a similar role where he's kind of a red zone guy and a passing down back who seems to get hard yards for this team and make compelling plays? Do you think he can have a similar role elsewhere where maybe you're using him as a bye week starter in fantasy?
Well, I mean, we've seen some of these, more diminutive players do this before. Darren Sproles has done this before, right? So I'm not feeling it, but not going to dismiss it out of hand. I mean, he's not going to make a lot of money, and sorry, you're a running back, young man, but that's the way of the world. So hopefully he finds a place where there is, a niche there that he could fill. Maybe it's Philadelphia.
Yeah, maybe it is. I'm feeling it just because I've always loved his talent, and I think that his talent has been compelling enough to work his way into a position. But I'm not feeling him as anything more as a waiver wire guy you add on. So
hopefully it's an NFC East team so he can continue playing the Giants twice a year and score us all the touchdowns.
See, there you go. So or Detroit, when they occasionally got to play them, will 12 personnel, 2 tight end usage continue to increase in 2023? It seems like we saw a pretty big increase in this last year. Do you think that trend continues?
I think yes. There's plenty of talent at the position, and the various types of tight ends who kind of fill the different roles, the inline guys, the move tight ends. So there's plenty of talent there, and teams seem to have there seems to be no shortage of tight ends. While there might be shortages of other things in this world, tight ends are abundant. This draft class is loaded with them, as you have outlined previously on this very podcast. And so yeah, I think they will continue using it. I guess the only caveat for me would be, there's also a lot of receivers ready to play pro football coming out of school. Maybe but I don't know that precludes anyone from using 12. They can still use plenty of wide receivers. So.
Yeah, I think they'll mix and match. They'll continue to mix and match, but I think we are going to see more 12 personnel as well, especially because I don't think opposing defenses can turn on a dime what they've drafted and acquired and fielded in terms of smaller personnel. So it just seems like for the next 3 to 4 years, I think we have a chance to see a lot of 2 tight end sets having the advantage. I mean, look at the Super Bowl, and you saw both teams use a lot of 2 tight end sets with tight ends on the wings, and then they did a lot with the running game and the play action passing game off that, and it just creates so many schematic difficulties for defenses to account for, and the size advantage does help when your when your outside linebackers are safety size. So I'm definitely feeling this, and I think the outshoot of this that I kind of want to talk about is you look at a player like Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who is maybe the top wide receiver prospect in this class, and he's definitely a good player, but he's a Cooper Kupp type of player when you're talking about the position, not necessarily a one-to-one comparison, though where his strengths are fit for the same role that Cooper Kupp has, which is using him in the slot, occasionally on the outside as a flanker, but he's not a speed demon. And most people think of a wide receiver 1 in the draft as a primary X receiver, the split end. And certainly we've seen, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Anquan Bolden, Michael Thomas, JuJu Smith-Schuster, all be slot flanker hybrids.
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, great example there too. So I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba very well could earn a role where he has a high volume and his production matches his draft stock. But I think that there will be fewer teams that are going to be going after that. So I guess my question to you is, do you think we're going to see a shrinkage, Smith-Njigba notwithstanding, he can be the exception. Do you think we're going to see a shrinkage in productive slot receivers? I mean, look at Hunter Renfrow, who looked like he was ready to break out and zip last year.
Yeah, and you would have thought with the New England crew coming to town, they've built their stock and trade on maximizing the abilities of those guys. So it's maybe too narrow a sample size, and Hunter Henry was hurt a lot, so I'm not gonna just give up the ghost on that one. I just drafted him really late in a way too early mock draft, and it is way too early. Everybody, just a thought as I've been going through the first couple drafts I've done. I feel miserable. Like with every other pick, I'm going, I don't really like this guy. It strikes me, Matt, you feel this or fuck this. I haven't fallen in love with anybody yet, and not fall in love. I don't think we have enough information in a way too early mock draft, and also to know what the outcomes are going to be. But also, I haven't had time to fall in love with situations and values and prices, and I think that's more of the things that I start feeling really good about. Going, oh, I really like this guy's price. I don't feel good about anyone's price now. I think I'm overpaying for every damn player. And so that's part of this. But I do think that, I don't think the slot is going the way of the dodo, but I think there's going to be more guys working the slot, and many of them will be tight ends.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable answer. And I think the question that offshoots from what your explanation is with your answer should be, feel it or fuck it. I know you're still going to do it regardless of your answer, but feel it or fuck it. Drafting in fantasy football before free agency.
Fuck it, but it's part of the job, right? But also it is, I do find it to be a helpful exercise and just start, ingraining the values and ingraining some of, pretty much already know who your plant your flag guys are going to be. And maybe that changes and shifts a little bit, or you add to that list as you see values that really stand out to you. But like in the most recent one I'm doing, I think I had the first pick overall. I felt pretty good about the first pick overall. The turn kind of like had some choices that I really didn't care for. Next turn, I felt a lot better about the choices, so it just seems like, there's various levels of player that I've still got to come around to, come to grips with what the price is. And as you know, I am old and mean and cheap, and I don't want to overpay for anything. And I felt like, I feel a little bit like I'm overpaying for some assets here, and, like Breece Hall among them, right? You're wondering, if we learned anything. J.K. Dobbins told us last year, slow it down a little bit with those ACL recoveries. Yes. I mean, we've gotten to the point where we think this technology is so great, and, the medical, capabilities are so great that these guys inevitably return in short order. Not inevitably.
There's one Adrian Peterson. That's basically the
and his name is Terry Allen. Yeah.
There we go. And I would also say I'm definitely feeling the idea of being able to use a game to do your research. So if drafting allows you to it forces, kind of influences you as a nice little carrot or sweetener to be researching stuff, then yeah, I'm all for it. That's awesome. So let's move on to IDP a little bit. We don't really do that very often, but Nick Bolton was one of those players that was so much fun to watch in college. Mark Schofield and I a couple years ago, watched Nick Bolton just crushing Mac Jones, and Mac Jones kind of standing up to that and making a heck of a play. But Bolton was one of those guys that was so much fun. And he had a terrific season this year, maybe not from a fantasy perspective, but like leading tackles for the Chiefs, certainly getting compared to guys like Gerard Mayo and Donta Hightower by the Chiefs staff. Is he a linebacker one in the near future?
he was almost like hit holy territory in my house yesterday because one of my showdown lineups might have included the Chiefs defense in a featured role. So he's certainly higher on my radar. I thought, I think entirely possible, right? I mean, we're always looking for those linebackers, those disruptive playmakers. So yes, he will. Maybe not linebacker one. I think mostly we stick with the big tackle machines.
Yeah.
Still to this point as linebacker ones, but he'll be on the radar.
Yeah, he certainly is. I mean, he was. I think from what I've seen as linebackers overall, I think he was 33rd out of all fantasy linebackers, depending on your scoring system.
Yep.
And then 28th if you looked at inside linebackers. So he's climbing, and it is year 2 for him. So I think there's a real possibility and he can blitz. So
he's a value.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on what they do there. But the corollary to this is Jalen Hurts. That fumble to me, my feel it or fuck it is, was that fumble just the easiest bet in this game? That in hindsight.
In hindsight, feel it, and in foresight, fuck it. I mean, I'll bet on it. Like when I bet, I'm betting lottery ticket style. I'm not a professional gambler, so I'm not sitting there trying to build a bankroll. I'm sitting there trying to have fun. So that seems like the kind of dark tossy kind of bet that you would make. And also, I mean, he has the ball in his hands a lot, and he's trying to do a lot with it. So I don't always look at things like this as a negative, because sometimes when you try to do 10,000 things, one of them is going to go awry.
I wish I had thought about it, because I'm not a betting person either. But if I were, I would have bet on that. Would have been the one I bet on, just because studying him in college, I think his middle name was Fumble. I mean, he was one of those guys that because of the extra effort, the extra time he tries to create, the ball comes loose trying to make dynamic movement, which is just common for any player with the ball. He's a terrific young quarterback. But yeah, he fumbled a lot at Alabama and Oklahoma, and that would have been one that I thought I should have. I wish I had bet money on. That's one of those. Okay, so moving back, AJ Brown, is he a better TO?
Fuck that. Nobody's a better TO than TO. But he's a very good player, and I think right now, in this offense, I mean, is there not if I was being a pot stirrer here, is there not an argument to be made that he's 1B?
Oh, 1B
in Philadelphia.
1B to DeVonta Smith.
All right.
Okay. All right. We may get to that in a little bit here. I think AJ Brown has a chance to be mentioned along the same lines of T.O. I think he's getting closer to that, but I'm with you. Fuck that right now. Let's not get T.O. into the conversation. But man, he can track the ball. He can play inside, outside. He's a beast physically. He's terrific. He's very good on the outside in terms of winning contested plays. And his bread and butter, all those dig routes up in the middle and being able to run after the catch. I don't think he's as good of a runner after the catch as T.O. was. I'll put
these
it
big
that way.
Comparisons. I was listening to my buddy MJD compare Patrick Mahomes to Tom Brady and saying he's kind of moved ahead. Going, you might want to slow your roll a little bit, Maurice.
Yeah, let's listen. We'll get to Let's just go ahead and go to that. Patrick Mahomes. If you had a quarterback to defend the planet from aliens, and you had to pick a team, and you had to have a quarterback to win one game, so that the aliens don't send us to the mines and they leave us alone, because they're some oddball galaxy where
I've worked on this article before.
This.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds familiar, doesn't it? Would he be the quarterback to defend the planet?
He would be the quarterback to feel that 100%.
Yeah,
he would be right now. Yeah. And Tom Brady would be the underwear model to defend the planet.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah, or he would just you could just cut out that picture of him and Tony Dungy and maybe paste it on a satellite image projecting out into space, and they might not even come to the planet.
There you go.
So but yeah, I mean, playing on a high ankle sprain like he did, and while he wasn't he wasn't lighting it up. The fact that he could run still, and he's an underrated runner. And that was something, you thought you were going to see more out of when you watched him at Texas Tech, because he ran a lot at Texas Tech, but he hasn't needed to really. And I think he's definitely the quarterback to defend the planet. And while I don't think he's better than Tom Brady based on the bullet points, I'd take him over Tom Brady.
Right now,
I would.
Of course.
Yeah, I would. But if you were going to say better all-around skills, it depends on what you're looking for from a skill set. Because
exactly.
The fact that Mahomes is in the conversation is a compliment to Mahomes alone. We can just leave it at that right now.
Like the track record of success for one Tom Brady, whatever else you think of him, or cheating, a long record of cheating as well.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just leave that there for right now. That's the wisdom of sometimes of just going, we don't need to go there. Let's see. Marquez Valdes Scantling, is he a fantasy factor in 2023?
I'm going to surprise you and say feel it, because he's going to be fairly cheap, right? Like he'll be outside the top 3. You'll not be drafting him as one of your starting assets. It'll be his second year in the offense. Showed signs of life. Maybe he can build on that a little bit. And I know we've been saying he can build on that a long time for Marquez Valdes Scantling, and yet he has built nothing. So that's, on the range of possible outcomes as he continues to build nothing. But I will, while Patrick Mahomes is defending the universe, he needs pieces to help him defend. And those pieces are all going to have weeks where they're viable. And we saw that already with MVS. And if he can build a little more consistency into that, and we'll see some of those other pieces may not be there.
Yeah, consistency is the big thing with him, is that, and he has built a bankroll, and coming from South Florida, and really being a late round pick, he's done pretty well. But because he's such a good athlete, and he has worked at his game. The problem is that for us, when we watch him, we see him drop passes that he should have no business dropping. But the good part of that is that he must be good enough that Patrick Mahomes will go to him a second straight time, and he will make the play. Now, technically, his technical skills are just bad enough that you have this kind of thing where you look at him and go, he's just not very good compared to the players that you would want to compare him to. And I think that's the thing with him, is that the speed is good enough, the route running can be good enough, the catch point stuff is the box of chocolates, you just never know what you're going to get kind of deal. But Mahomes, showing faith of him, he can make difficult plays with bad technique. Right. And when you can do that, there is something impressive about you as an athlete. Because if we were to remove that he's a starting wide receiver in the NFL on the Kansas City Chiefs, and you were watching this dude in a park, on a field, or you were playing against him,
or you were the dude in like the hotel commercial running around scouting players.
Right, there you go. And
you would get the excited look on your face.
Exactly. If you see a kid who's literally making difficult plays with bad technique, you'd be impressed by that. And that's kind of where Valdes Scantling is. It doesn't make him a top fantasy threat, but he will be a factor. I would agree. JuJu Smith-Schuster, is he going to be back in KC?
Sounds like he wants to be. And him wanting to be is going to be part of this equation, because the money, it will be part of the equation. Remember, MVS got paid quite a bit more than JuJu, right? So, JuJu's going to want some more. It's how much more is going to be the crux of the issue here. I think they'd be wise to bring him back. I think he would be wise to return. So I'll say feel it, but money will be an issue at some point.
I want to say feel it. I think that would be the best possible fit for both teams, but I'm going to say fuck it, because I think they're going to say we're going to have faith in Skyy Moore or Kadarius Toney.
They probably should not have that.
Which they probably should not have that. but Skyy Moore, I think they will, even if it's a bit of a stretch. So,
and Tony, they will. I mean, he's delivered some. So.
Yeah. So Britton Covey, do you even know who that is, Bob Harris?
I do know who that is. I am vaguely familiar with Britton Covey, because he's the guy we thought was going to be inactive when Greg Ward was going to be the guy who came in and was the guy who was going to throw a pass that was a non-quarterback that made everyone's prop bets work. But then he was inactive, and Covey was the punt returner, and everything was good.
Yeah. So do you think he has any remote shot of being a fantasy factor in 2023?
I do not. Fuck him.
Yeah, I don't either really, but I would keep an eye on him for a couple of years. I could see maybe second contract.
Of course you would.
Slot guy. Of course I would. Yes. All right, DeVonta Smith. Future fantasy #1 for you, or you're feeling that, aren't you?
Yes, and at least one of these way too early mock drafts I've been in, because I had the first pick overall, he came back around the turn at the end of 2, and he has my wide receiver 1. This draft is crazy wide receiver heavy. I will say that, right? I mean, crazy wide receiver heavy. I think there was 3 running backs and a tight end went in the first round. Everyone else was wide receivers in the first round, and the second round was equally wide receiver heavy. So that being said, I do think look, man, down the stretch, you couldn't tell me that he wasn't the wide receiver 1 in that offense down the stretch.
See, my answer is fuck it. I'm not arguing with people like you talking about DeVonta Smith as a potential wide receiver 1 in the same way that fuck it, I don't want to argue with anybody about Calvin Ridley. He may
30+% target share down the stretch. That puts you in the territory.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm not going to get all. Otherwise, you're just arguing semantics of what a wide receiver 1 is.
Right, that's it.
Yeah,
it's where you draft him, right? I mean, if I is he an ideal wide receiver 1? No. Is he a serviceable wide receiver 1? I'll take it. Maybe so is Jalen Waddle.
Is he a wide receiver 1 because AJ Brown is there, and teams eventually are like, we've got to focus on AJ Brown?
Or is AJ Brown a wide receiver 1 because everyone's realizing DeVonta Smith is burning them? Come on, man, get with the program.
Nah, fuck that. I'm totally AJ Brown. But I'm feeling DeVonta Smith as a fantasy guy is a wide receiver 1. All right, Isaiah Pacheco, running back 1 in KC in 2023. Now that we've continued to ask this question at least 3 times in the past 9 weeks, I think it feels like I've asked this question.
Feeling him as the running back 1 of some number.
Yeah, I'm feeling a draft, to be honest with you, and it's going to be a wide receiver, but I do think I'm going to running back, but I think that running back will be either a day 1 talent like the kid Evans out of Ole Miss, who Zach Evans, who might fall to the 4th round, but be uber talented, and they take him, and then Isaiah Pacheco was like a nice story.
For 7th rounders, Matt, you know better.
Yeah, they might be, and the way that Pacheco has played, and Jerrion Ealy could possibly be in the argument, I think. Yeah, Pacheco's probably safe for now, but I'm not feeling him as a running back 1 in fantasy. Maybe a running back 2. There we go. All right. We've already talked about Skyy Moore as a potential fantasy asset. Travis Kelce, #1 overall in fantasy in 2023 drafts.
Yes. There's going to be drafts where I draft him 1st overall, without a doubt. I mean, so I feel like, and I have him ranked pretty high. I have him ranked inside my top 6. And I think all those top 6, as I go through various best balls, if I get, out of 100+ best balls, if I have 6+ #1 picks, I'm going to have 6+ players in that #1 pick overall, because diversifying seems like a wise course of action these days. According to Jonathan Taylor, that would be a wise course. So yeah, I think there will be times where I draft him. Look, you're after leverage over the field. Who like in the last year or 2, I've talked about Christian McCaffrey being that guy at running back. And for the most part, he had been. He wasn't this year. I still like him an awful lot. Travis Kelce was a player and a half at his position this year in average weekly scoring. I want that leverage over the field, and you're not going to get it anywhere with the 1st round, I don't think.
I'll say this. Fuck the age worries. Talk to me when he turns 35. When he turns 35, I'll start to have a little bit more concern. But he's got 2 more years before that.
Of course, maybe I have an old age bias, so I say the same with Derrick Henry. Look at me go.
Eagles red zone defense giving up the same play for a touchdown to Skyy Moore and Tony, back to back.
As Jonathan Gannon travels to Arizona for his head coaching interview, he might want to have a good answer, because that's probably the first question.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how does that happen? Fuck that. I mean, it was. I want to say. I'd rather say it was really sharp play calling by Andy Reid, who is a really sharp play caller. So I'll probably go with that side of it. But come on, man, you got to be ready for these things when you're playing Andy Reid.
I'm ready to say fuck all those people who kept saying Andy Reid can't win a big Super Bowl, but they're all going to blame, say, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, but they were all probably also the same people willing to say, well, without Tyreek Hill, they're going to get exposed and they're not going to get there. Certainly Patrick Mahomes is a huge factor. Travis Kelce is a huge factor, but you got to have
their
great
usage
players.
Also a huge factor.
Yeah, you have to have a great player, and the way that they line up and set these
Who
guys
else is
up,
doing the ring around the rosy? Who else is playing the snow globe game here? Nobody.
Yeah,
this is like 4D chess. Everyone else is playing hopscotch.
This is why these so and so isn't good enough, and this person is the big reason. Really, most of the time, that's bullshit. Most of the time, it's a team sport, and you have to have some guys who can create and make huge plays outside the scheme, but you also need to have a great scheme to put these guys in position to have easy plays so you don't have to lean on them to do the crazy stuff all the time. And that's where Dak Prescott screwed, is while I'm not putting him in the same category as Patrick Mahomes, if you can scheme, he can do things outside the scheme for you, but if you lean on him to do that all the time, he's going to earn a lot of criticism. And a lot of players tend to be one range or the other, where it's like, oh, they're being protected to, and then when they get exposed, they can't do stuff. Daniel Jones to Baker Mayfield. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so there we go.
My turn. So is there a first round wide receiver in the NFL draft this year?
I say fuck it, though there may be a team that takes Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and I can see that. If you're wanting to get a guy in that role, that Kupp Jefferson, more Kupp, Amon-Ra, St. Brown role, and I would say closer to St. Brown than Kupp, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a very good wide receiver. I think he's one of those guys on that list. Otherwise, I would not draft a receiver in the first round if I were a GM in this particular draft.
So what are you doing in dynasty drafts? When does the first wide receiver hit?
That's a good question. I think that the thing about wide receivers is from a fantasy perspective, that's different from an NFL draft perspective. So there's going to be enough guys that you could probably get that are going to be second and third round guys who will get a chance for an early impact within the first couple of years. So you can still probably say it's a safe bet to draft some wide receivers at the end of the first round if you're patient. If you're playing dynasty like you play redraft, then I think tight end and running back and quarterback are your bets this year. And I would say running back and quarterback and one of the top 2 to 3 tight ends this year will be your instant impact potential players. Dalton Kincaid has a chance to be what Kyle Pitts was last year, if you ask me. I think he, in the right spot, he could, not last year, but the year before. I think he has a chance to be able to do that. I think there's probably 3 to 5 running backs who are worthwhile, and I think that there's three Matt Waldman,
quarterbacks. Short version. Matt Waldman is trading all his draft picks.
No, because I'm a patient guy. I'm a patient guy. But if I'm one of you redraft posing as dynasty guys,
look,
then
man,
I'm trading.
I still have like Joshua Kelly based on your recommendation. Come on, don't accuse me of letting go of talent, young man. I'll not have it. Okay, one last one. Feel it or fuck it. That flag. Did James Bradbury hold enough to draw a flag?
No, not at that point in the game. They should have let him play in the spirit of the game. No, from a hall monitor perspective, yes, technically it was a flag, and he admitted that it was.
Would that have been a catchable pass if he hadn't been held?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I don't know. I saw Drew Davenport arguing it would be this morning, so I thought it was a good argument. I thought probably not, and I probably wouldn't have called that, but I'm not mad that it got called. So
yeah. I would have probably let him play, but that's just me. There's a lot of little ticky tack things, and this is one of the hardest subjects anyway, because when you talk about what's a push off and what's a hold when it comes to those things, you have to break it down on a certain level until you start seeing the techniques enough that you understand what the player's trying to do and what you're looking at. And like literally you need full-time officials who study tape and literally like can understand what that technique looks like, so that in a split second they can see the difference and tell you the difference between a hold and a push off. But until we have that, that's not going to happen. So fuck the NFL for not having full-time officials. That's my thought.
It's not like they can afford them or anything. Come on.
Oh, I know. I mean, they're so poor. I mean, I don't even know how they eat. These poor, or train, or yeah.
All right, football season's over.
I'm done.
Football season's over. I'm going to take the day off. So right, I don't do that very often.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.